The sun rose over savannah, turning the grasses into waves of gold. In a small village where the river bent like a serpent, life began with the rhythm of drums, the smoke of cooking fires, and the quiet footsteps of women preparing the day's work. Among them walked a young girl, carrying not a basket of grain or a jug of water, but a pouch of dried leaves and roots. Her name was whispered with curiosity, sometimes with awe, and sometimes with fear. Nia. Nia was no ordinary child. From the time she could walk, she had followed her grandmother, Mama Kanda, into the forest. While other children played with carved toys or chased goats, Nia watched the old woman kneel beside plants, cutting their stems with sharpened stone, murmuring words of respect to the earth. Every leaf has a spirit, Mama Kanda told her. Every root has a secret. If you listen closely, the forest will teach you. And Nia listened. By the age of 10, she could identify plants that cured fever, herbs that eased childbirth, and roots that numb pain. She knew which tree bark to boil for stomach sickness, which seeds to crush for snakebite, and which flowers could calm the restless mind. Her grandmother often tested her, pointing to a sprig of green hidden among the brush. "Tell me its name," she would say, and Nia, with eyes bright as dawn, would answer without hesitation. The villagers soon noticed her gift. When a boy broke his leg falling from a tree, it was Nia who splintered the bone with branches and wrapped it in healing poultices. When an old man coughed blood, it was Nia who brewed a bitter tea that brought him relief. People began coming to her with their aches, their wounds, their sick children, and more often than not, they left healed. But with healing came whispers. "She is touched by the spirits," some said, their voices respectful. "She is dangerous," others muttered, their eyes narrowed. A child should not know such things. Nia herself cared little for the whispers. She was not chasing power, only knowledge. Each patient she healed filled her with quiet pride. Each success convinced her that her path was guided by something greater. Her grandmother often reminded her, "The work of the healer is not for praise, Nia, it is for the living." To heal is to carry both the pain and the hope of others. Yet it was a heavy burden for one so young. One day, a woman ran into the village carrying her baby, limp and burning with fever. The child's eyes rolled back, his tiny chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. The mother wailed, begging anyone to save him. The men of the village shook their heads. "He will not see the morning," one elder said grimly. But Nia stepped forward. She took the baby into her arms, her hands trembling but steady. She crushed leaves into a paste, mixed them with water, and whispered prayers as she fed it to the child. Then she placed cool cloths across his forehead and held him through the night. By morning, the fever broke. The child stirred, opened his eyes, and reached for his mother. The woman cried out in joy, pressing her forehead to Nia's feet. "You have brought him back from death," she sobbed. The village erupted. Some celebrated her as a gift from the ancestors. Others recoiled, whispering that no child should have such power, that her medicine was not medicine at all, but witchcraft. It was the first time the word struck her like a spear, which, that night, she sat by the fire with Mama Kanda, her heart heavy. "Grandmother," she asked, "why do they call me that? I only wish to heal." Mama Kanda's face was lined with wisdom and sorrow. When people do not understand something, they fear it. And what they fear, they often call witchcraft. But remember this, child, witches curse. Doctors heal. You are a healer. Never forget the difference. Nia nodded, but the word lingered in her mind. She could not shake away a hiss from lips sharp as venom. She wondered if healing would always carry such suspicion, if her gift would forever be seen as both blessing and curse. Still, she did not stop. She could not stop. Each day, she ventured deeper into the forest, learning new secrets, adding to her knowledge. Each night, she treated the sick, binding wounds, easing pain, saving lives. With every patient, her reputation grew. She became known not just in her village, but in neighboring ones. People traveled for days to seek her help, and always, behind the gratitude, there were whispers. She is wise. She is dangerous. She is a healer. She is a witch. It was a fragile balance, one that could tip at any moment. For though she was only a girl with herbs and hope, the world was not ready for her truth, that she was Africa's first doctor, centuries ahead of her time. And the more lives she saved, the more the tension grew. The memory of the fevered child lingered like smoke over the village. Some praised Nia as a savior. Others muttered that she had crossed into forbidden realms. Yet for Nia herself, the child was not proof of magic. It was proof of learning. She had studied the plants, listened to the forest, and used her hands with care. That was all. But the village would not forget so easily. Weeks later, when the harvest was heavy and drums thundered in celebration, a man staggered into the square, clutching his chest. His breath rattled, his skin burned, and his eyes rolled with delirium. He collapsed in the dirt before the crowd. "It is a curse," one elder said gravely. "The ancestors are punishing him." The women wailed, the men shook their heads, and the village prepared to watch him die. But then, like a spark catching dry grass, one voice rose above the rest. "Find the girl," someone whispered. "Find the healer." And so they did. Nia was pulled from her hut, wide-eyed and trembling. The man lay before her, his body writhing, his breath ragged. All eyes turned to her, expectant, fearful, desperate. Her heart pounded. She had healed fevers, mended bones, soothed mothers in childbirth. But this was different. This was a grown man, and his body was breaking before her eyes. If she failed, it would not only be his life lost, but her own reputation shattered. Still, she knelt beside him. She pressed her ear to his chest, listening to the drumbeat of his heart. It was irregular, weak, like a drum played by unsteady hands. She touched his forehead, burning hot. His breath carried the smell of rot. She remembered her grandmother's teachings. When the chest rattles like a broken calabash, the illness hides in the lungs. Nia sprang to her feet and ran to her hut. She gathered herbs, bitter leaves that drew out heat, roots that loosened breath, bark that soothed pain. She ground them into a paste, mixed them with water, and returned to the man. "Hold him," she ordered, surprising even herself. The villagers obeyed, holding the man steady as Nia pried open his mouth and fed him the bitter brew. He gagged, coughed, and swallowed. She placed heated stones on his chest, wrapped in cloth soaked with her herbal mix. She whispered prayers, not because she thought they alone could save him, but because the people needed to see her honor the spirits. Through the night, she stayed by his side, feeding him, cooling his body, pressing her ear to his chest. Slowly, so slowly, the rattling eased. His breathing steadied. By dawn, he opened his eyes. The crowd gasped. The man, weak but alive, sat up and spoke. "She brought me back." The village erupted in shouts, cries, ululations. Women threw their arms around Nia. Men clapped her shoulders. Children sang her name. She had done what no one thought possible, snatched a man from the edge of death. From that day, she was no longer just Mama Canda's granddaughter. She was a healer, but with her new title came new fear. "Did you see how she commanded us?" one villager muttered, as if she were more than a child. "She listens to spirits in the forest," another whispered. Who taught her these secrets? No one should know such things. The same people who bowed in gratitude also cast suspicious glances. Gratitude was fleeting. Fear lasted longer. Mama Kanda warned her, "Power is a river, child. It can quench thirst, but it can also drown. You must walk carefully, for people drink from your hands, but they also fear the depth of the water." Nia tried to heed the warning. She continued to heal quietly, without pride. She accepted no riches, only gifts of food or cloth. She prayed with the elders before giving medicine. She showed respect, even to those who doubted her. But the more she healed, the more the whispers spread beyond her village. Travelers carried stories. "There's a girl who can cure fever. A girl who can bring breath back to the dying. A girl who sees what others cannot." Soon, strangers arrived, desperate and hopeful. Mothers with sick children. Hunters with wounds that would not close. Warriors limping from battle. Each one left with relief, carrying her name like a flame to distant villages. And in those distant villages, too, the word followed her, not just healer, not just doctor, but witch. One evening, after treating a child who had nearly drowned, Nia overheard two women whispering behind her hut. "She is dangerous," one hissed. "But she saved the boy," the other replied. "Yes, but at what cost?" "No one cheats death without a price." The words pierced Nia's heart. Was that how they saw her? Not as someone who gave life, but as someone who bargained with death? That night, she sat alone under the stars, clutching her pouch of herbs. She wondered if her gift was a blessing or a curse. She wondered if one day the people she healed would turn against her. Yet even as fear pressed down, her resolve grew stronger. "If they call me witch, let them," she whispered to the night. "I will heal anyway, because to save life is greater than their fear." The stars shimmered above her, silent witnesses. And somewhere deep in the forest, the wind moved through the leaves as if in agreement. For Nia had taken her first step onto a path that would make her legend, a path where healing and danger walked side by side. The forest was her library, the earth her teacher. While others feared its shadows, Nia entered with reverence, carrying her woven pouch and a sharp stone for cutting. The canopy above whispered like an elder's voice, and every plant seemed to greet her as she passed. Her grandmother had taught her names, but Nia sought something more. She wanted to understand not only what healed, but why. When she crushed leaves into a paste, she noticed how some burned the tongue, while others soothed it. When she brewed teas, she tested them on herself first, sipping carefully, waiting for her stomach's reaction. She watched insects nibble at plants. If they avoided one, she marked it as poison. If they returned to another, she studied its effects. Her methods were not spells. They were experiments. She began keeping records in her own way, carving marks into pieces of bark, symbols that only she understood. A circle meant safe. A slash meant danger. A spiral meant works in small amounts, harmful in too much. It was a secret language of medicine, born from her curiosity. The villagers saw her wander with bark and herbs and shook their heads. "She speaks to trees," they muttered. "She listens to roots." But Nia knew better. She was not speaking to the forest. She was learning its science. One afternoon, a hunter arrived, his arm torn by the tusks of a wild boar. The wound was deep, the flesh ragged. Others gathered around him, murmuring prayers, certain he would not survive. But Nia stepped forward. She boiled water over the fire until it steamed, then poured it over the wound. The hunter howled in pain, but she held him still. Next, she crushed bitter leaves into a paste and packed it into the gash. She bound it tightly with strips of cloth and instructed him to return every day. At first, the villagers thought she was cruel. "She tortures him," they whispered. But within a week, the wound closed, pink and clean. Where once there had been fever and pus, there was now healing flesh. What Nia had discovered was simple, but revolutionary. Cleanliness prevented death. Heat killed infection. The forest had taught her, and she had listened. Another time, she treated a woman in childbirth whose baby would not come. The mother's screams echoed through the night. Elders prayed. The family wept. Nia knelt by her side, whispering encouragement, then reached into her pouch. She burned certain herbs that released calming smoke, guiding the woman's breathing until her body relaxed. Then she pressed firmly on the belly, helping the child into the world. A healthy cry pierced the hut, and the mother sobbed with relief. The villagers gasped. She brought life when death was near. They did not see that she had used knowledge of breath, of muscle, of patience. They did not see the science. They only saw the miracle. And so, her reputation grew, walking the thin line between healer and witch. Nia herself remained humble. She refused to hoard knowledge. She began teaching young women what she knew, showing them how to recognize plants, how to set bones, how to soothe fever. "One healer cannot carry the weight of all sickness," she told them. "If I fall, the work must live on through you." Some listened eagerly, learning her ways. Others were afraid, fearful of sharing her fate if the whispers of witchcraft grew louder. Still, she taught, planting seeds of wisdom in those willing to receive them. But her growing influence stirred unease among the elders. She does not follow the old ways, one complained during a council meeting. She trusts plants more than spirits. She questions traditions, another added. If the people believe her, they may stop listening to us. What they feared was not witchcraft. What they feared was change. For Nia's healing shifted the balance of power. Once, villagers had turned to elders and priests for answers, their words final. Now they turned to Nia, and in her hands, they saw results, not just prayers, but recovery. Whispers grew darker. She meddles with forces she cannot control. She challenges the ancestors. She must be watched. Yet, despite the suspicion, people continue to come. Some came in secret, ashamed to be seen seeking her help. Others came boldly, declaring they would rather risk whispers and bury their loved ones. Nia, for her part, focused on the work. Her hut became filled with jars of dried herbs, bundles of roots hanging from the ceiling, and stones carved with her strange markings. She developed new techniques, stitching wounds with animal sinew, creating salves to reduce swelling, even fashioning crude tools for minor surgeries. In truth, she was centuries ahead of her time, but she did not know how dangerous such brilliance could be, because knowledge, especially when carried by a woman, was a threat to tradition, to power, to those who ruled with fear. And the more lives she saved, the more enemies she gained. The elders began to plot. If her influence grew unchecked, they feared she would undermine their authority completely. They would not allow it. And so, in the shadows, plans were whispered, plans to bring her before the council, not as a healer, but as an accused witch. Nia, meanwhile, continued her work, unaware that every cure, every miracle, was bringing her closer to a trial that would decide her fate. The air in the village grew heavy, thick with something unspoken. By day, Nia still treated the sick, binding wounds and curing fevers. By night, she heard the whispers louder than ever, slithering like snakes through the darkness. She is dangerous. She thinks she is wiser than the spirits. She meddles where no woman should. At first, Nia ignored them. She believed her work spoke for itself. How could they deny the children who now lived because of her, the mothers who no longer died in childbirth, the warriors who returned whole from battle? But she soon realized healing was not enough. Every cure seemed only to deepen the divide between those who praised her and those who feared her. It was not just fear of her knowledge. It was fear of what her knowledge represented. The elders had always been the guardians of tradition. Their words guided marriages, disputes, harvest rituals, and healing. To question them was to question the ancestors themselves. But now people questioned, quietly at first, then openly. One night, in the council hut lit by flickering torches, an elder spoke with anger thick in his voice. This girl has disrupted the balance. The people look to her instead of us. They bring their sick to her instead of the shrine. If this continues, they will forget the ways of the ancestors. Another added, she teaches others her craft. Soon she will spread her poison beyond this village. Already strangers come seeking her. What will happen when her power grows larger than ours? A silence followed. They all knew the answer. Their authority would crumble. So they reached for the weapon fear had always given them. She is a witch. One declared, no healer gains power without taking something in return. She cheats death, but at what price? The ancestors will not be mocked. The council agreed. It was time to act. The test came days later. A messenger from the elders summoned Nia at dawn. She entered the council hut, where the air was hot with incense and suspicion. The elders sat in a circle, their eyes sharp, their voices hard. Nia, the oldest elder began, we have heard of your works. We have seen how you heal the sick and calm the dying. But we ask, by what power do you do these things? Nia bowed respectfully. By the knowledge of the earth. The plants give medicine, the water cleanses, the fire purifies. This is no secret. It is the gift of creation itself. Her answer did not please them. You speak as though you know more than the ancestors. Another elder spat. You act as though the spirits serve you. I serve life, Nia replied, her voice calm but firm. If a child is dying, shall I not help? If a mother is suffering, shall I not ease her pain? If the ancestors made the plants, did they not make them for us to use? The elders murmured uneasily. Her words had the ring of truth, but truth was dangerous when it undermined their power. At last, one elder rose and struck the floor with his staff. If you are no witch, prove it. We will bring before you one who is near death. Heal him, and you will be honored as a true daughter of the village. Fail, and you will be cast out as a deceiver. Nia's heart pounded. It was not healing she feared. She had faced death before. What she feared was a trap in their words. If she succeeded, they would envy her more. If she failed, they would condemn her. But she agreed. Bring him to me. They brought forth a man on the brink of death. His body was thin, his skin pale, his breath shallow. The villagers crowded the hut, their faces filled with both hope and dread. Nia knelt beside him. She smelled the sickness. His blood carried rot. His breath was sour with infection. She had treated this before. She knew what herbs might help, but his body was weak, too weak to endure much longer. She worked anyway. She brewed teas, applied poultices, cooled his fever, and whispered words of comfort. For 3 days and nights she labored, barely eating, barely sleeping. The villagers watched, murmuring prayers, waiting for a sign. On the 4th day, the man stirred. His breathing eased. He opened his eyes and whispered Nia's name. The people cried out in joy. She has done it again. She has saved him. But the elders did not cheer. Their faces hardened, their eyes burning with quiet rage. For each life she saved, she stole a piece of their authority. She is dangerous, one muttered. She defies the ancestors, another said. They could not deny her skill, but they could twist its meaning. If she could heal where others could not, then surely she was not using human power. Surely it was witchcraft. That night, as Nia returned to her hut, a group of children followed her, singing her name with joy. Yet behind them, women whispered, clutching their beads in fear. Warriors turned away, muttering prayers against curses. Nia sat alone in her hut, the walls heavy with drying herbs. She touched the jars of medicine, the bundles of roots, the markings she had carved into bark. These were her tools, her science, her truth. Yet outside, they saw only sorcery. She whispered to herself, if healing is witchcraft, then let them call me witch. I will still heal. I will still save. But deep inside, she felt the weight of the storm coming. The elders would not stop. Her gift had become her danger, and the word which, once only a whisper, was now on every tongue. The day the drum sounded, Nia knew they were not calling for celebration. Their rhythm was heavy, slow, like footsteps toward a grave. The whole village gathered in the square, faces tense, eyes sharp. At the center, a fire blazed, its smoke curling into the sky like a warning. The elders stood in a circle, staffs planted firmly in the ground. The oldest among them raised his voice, carrying the weight of judgment. Today we call Nia before us, he declared, to answer for her deeds. She heals where no healer should. She teaches what no woman should. She claims the power of life and death. We must know. Does she serve the ancestors, or does she serve dark forces? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked at Nia with sorrow. Mothers she had helped clutch their children, torn between gratitude and fear. Warriors she had healed looked at the ground, unwilling to meet her eyes. Nia stepped forward, her back straight, her face calm though her heart thundered in her chest. I have never cursed, she said. I have never taken life. I have only given healing. If this is wrong, then let the ancestors themselves judge me. The elders' eyes narrowed. Then you will face the trial by fire. A gasp swept through the villagers. The trial was ancient, feared by all. A pot of water was placed upon the flames until it boiled furiously. Into it, the elders dropped a stone, sinking beneath the bubbling surface. You will plunge your hand into the fire's water, the elder said. If the ancestors protect you, you will emerge unharmed. If not, your guilt is proven, and the village will know what you are. Nia's breath caught. She knew the trick of this test. It was designed for pain. No one emerged without burns. It was not truth they sought, but fear. Yet she also knew she could not refuse. Refusal would be confession. She stepped toward the pot. Heat licked her skin, the steam burning her face. The villagers leaned forward, holding their breath. She whispered a prayer, not to the ancestors, but to the earth, the plants, the knowledge she carried. Then, without hesitation, she thrust her hand into the boiling water. The pain was instant, searing. Her vision blurred, her teeth clenched, but she did not cry out. Her fingers closed around the stone, and she pulled it free, holding it high for all to see. The crowd erupted, some in awe, some in fear. Her skin was red, blistering, but she stood tall, her hand steady. "See," a mother cried. "The ancestors protect her." "No," an elder snarled. "She endures because she is unnatural. She is protected by dark spirits." The crowd split, voices rising, arguments breaking out. Some shouted for her release, others for her punishment. Nia, trembling but resolute, raised her voice above the chaos. "You call me witch because you do not understand. But ask yourselves, when your child lay dying, who saved them? When your wounds festered, who cleaned them? When mothers labored, who brought their babies into the world? Was it curses that healed you? Or was it knowledge given by the Creator to all who seek it?" Her words cut through the noise. Some bowed their heads in shame, remembering their lives owed to her hands. Others turned away, unwilling to let go of fear. The elders, sensing their power slipping, struck the ground with their staffs. "Enough! The trial is complete. She is marked. She is no longer one of us." Gasps echoed, banished, cast out. It was a sentence worse than death, life without kin, without protection. But before the warriors could drag her away, a voice rose from the crowd. An old woman stepped forward, leaning on a stick. Her face was lined with age, her eyes sharp with memory. "Do you call her witch?" the woman shouted. "Then call me witch as well, for I too have used these herbs. I too have saved lives. Would you cast out all who heal? Would you choose fear over the living?" Another voice joined, then another, mothers, hunters, children, all crying out in protest. The crowd swelled with anger, not at Nia, but at the elders who sought to silence her. The council faltered. Their judgment no longer carried the same weight. The oldest elder's face twisted with fury. If she stays, she will tear the village apart. But Nia, still clutching the hot stone, lifted her burned hand into the air. "If healing tears your village apart, then perhaps it is not I who should leave, but the fear you cling to. I will go where knowledge is not a crime, where medicine is not called witchcraft, and those who seek healing may follow." With that, she turned and walked in the square, her hand blistered but unbowed, her spirit unbroken. A handful of villagers followed, mothers carrying children, young women eager to learn, men whose lives she had saved. The elders watched in silence, realizing too late that in trying to destroy her, they had only spread her fire. And so Nia left not defeated, but reborn. The world will remember her not as a witch, but as the first of her kind. A doctor, a keeper of knowledge, a woman who dared to heal when others dared only to fear. Nia walked away from the only home she had ever known, her burned hand wrapped in cloth, her pouch of herbs slung over her shoulder. Behind her, the drums of the village faded into silence. Ahead, the vast savanna stretched like an open page, waiting for her story to be written. She did not walk alone. A handful of villagers followed, mothers carrying babies she had once saved, hunters who owed her their limbs, and young women who whispered that they wanted to learn. Their steps were hesitant at first, but as the distance from the village grew, so did their courage. Together they built a new home near a river where the earth was fertile and the forest generous. Here, Nia became more than a healer. She became a teacher. She gathered the young women around her and showed them how to grind roots into powder, how to brew teas with care, how to stitch wounds with sinew. She taught them patience, observation, and the language of the forest. "Do not fear knowledge," she told them. "Fear ignorance, for ignorance kills more surely than any illness." Her students listened wide-eyed, their hands eager to mimic hers. They began recording her knowledge in their own ways, patterns woven into cloth, marks carved into wood, songs sung in low voices, so the lessons could never be forgotten. Nia's reputation spread far beyond the new village. Travelers brought stories of the woman who healed where others could not. Some called her a savior, others a heretic, but all knew her name. Chiefs sent messengers to request her aid. Mothers carried sick children for miles to find her. Warriors sought her wisdom before battle, trusting her herbs to keep them strong. Yet still, the word which followed her, whispered by those who feared what they did not understand. But by now, Nia no longer trembled at the name. She wore it like a cloak, knowing the truth beneath it. "If witch means healer," she once said, "then let the world call me witch. I will not stop." Years passed, and Nia grew older. Her hair silvered. Her hands bore the marks of countless hours grinding herbs and binding wounds, but her mind was sharper than ever. Her students, now skilled healers themselves, carried her knowledge to other villages. They healed fever, saved mothers, cured infections, and with every success, they spread her legacy further. But the elders of her old village had not forgotten. They heard of her growing influence and trembled at the thought that their children and grandchildren were abandoning tradition for her ways. They spoke her name with bitterness, warning others that her teachings were cursed. And so, history was divided. In the songs of her students, she was remembered as a great doctor, the first of her kind. In the stories of her enemies, she was a dangerous witch who defied the ancestors. But truth has a way of surviving, even when buried beneath lies. One day, as Nia sat beneath the baobab tree, a young girl approached her, a stranger, but with eyes full of fire. She carried a pouch of herbs, worn and familiar, and bowed low before the elder woman. "My village calls me cursed," the girl whispered. "They say I meddle in things I should not. But when the sick cry out, I cannot stay silent. Teach me, mother. Show me how to walk your path." Nia's heart stirred. She saw herself in the girl. The same curiosity, the same burden, the same fire that could not be extinguished. She smiled, her face wrinkling like folded cloth, and placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Then listen closely," she said, "for the forest still speaks, and its voice must not be silenced." And so the line continued. Long after Nia's death, her name faded from memory, her teachings hidden in fragments of song and story. Colonizers and chroniclers who came centuries later dismissed her as legend, or worse, erased her entirely. They wrote of kings and warriors, but rarely of women who healed. Yet whispers of her survived, in the chants of midwives, in the secret recipes of healers, in the knowledge passed from mother to daughter, aunt to niece, healer to apprentice. Though her village had cast her out, though history had tried to bury her, Nia's work lived on in the hands of every healer who followed. And today, when we speak of Africa's doctors, we must remember her, not as a witch, not as an outcast, but as a pioneer who carried the flame of medicine in an age of fear. Her trial by fire did not destroy her. It made her eternal, because the truth cannot be burned away. The truth survives in every life saved, every child born safely, every fever broken by the knowledge she once carried. And that truth is this: the woman they called a witch was Africa's first doctor,